So, you want to become a speed miner, huh? Well then, have a seat, grab a dark morkite, and let's get to it. My name is Zos, and I've been speedrunning for quite a while, and got some records during the years, like the second fastest EDD in 8 minutes and 32 seconds with Silas, and the best solo scout EDD in 14 minutes and 18 seconds, suggested on the top right. I do these runs on my Twitch channel over at twitch.tv/Zos in the description if you want to come check us out live. That would mean a lot. Now, it's important to know that speedrunning has gone a long way, because Update 32 and Update 33 changed a lot in speedrunning. Dreadnought-wise, the regular Dreadnought does not moonwalk anymore, and they have more armor and more HP, but they're more reliable to kill this way. Mule-wise, there's just a little cable that you need to attach. There. Insane changes, I know. And Update 32 brought escorts and on-site refinery, so that's for most of the changes. So, to start speedrunning, you will need at least one promoted miner, because as you can imagine, during speedruns, we don't really like RNG over here. And since all of the missions are randomly generated in Deep Rock Galactic, except for the deep dives and the elite deep dives missions, which you need to be promoted to play, you will need at least one promotion on Scout or Driller preferably. Now yes, this is the question that comes a lot when speedrunning on solo. Do I pick Scout for the mobility and learn how to deal with the dreads and masses? Or do I pick Driller to skip parts of the map and get better time overall? Well, the answer is, it depends. Mostly on the seed. If you have a seed that goes in a spiral for multiple stages, there's a high chance that you want to go Driller. You'll make it to the objectives faster and Molly will go back to the drop pod sooner. It can come down to personal preferences on some seeds, where it doesn't really matter, and others where there's a 10-minute gap between Scout and Driller. So if you're just starting, I'd recommend going Scout to map out the layout of the map generally, and afterwards if you find out that Driller is best, then switch. But the class isn't really what matters most in speedrunning. What takes up the most time in the deep dive and elite deep dive speedrunning is Molly. I'm not joking, management really needs to invest in some better equipment. But all jokes aside, the way back to the drop pod can be really long, which is exactly why you would prefer going Driller on some maps for that specifically. But thankfully there are strategies to bypass long molly times in multiplayer and some on solo too. So here we're going to talk about the drop pod's location strategy. This one only works in multiplayer. This aims at manipulating the drop pod's location to purposely have it closer to molly so there's less molly time. So how do you do that? Well, the drop pod lands on the opposite side of molly. So if you press the button in the last room of the seed, then the drop pod's going to be at spawn. But if you press the button at spawn, then the drop pod's going to be in one of the last rooms of the seed. Now, if one dwarf is on the opposite side of molly where the drop pod is supposed to land, it will reverse this technique and land on around where the button has been pressed. This can work on 2 or 4 players. Only one dwarf needs to be there. And sometimes it's also necessary that it's the host of the session that needs to backtrack. So that's a way to be faster on multiplayer. It can easily save you 1 to 2 minutes of time. Well, on solo there was a strategy that consisted in using the holes dug by the resupply when coming down to make Molly go faster back to the drop pod. Unfortunately, Molly cannot take these holes anymore due to cucking a lot of unaware teams in low O2 missions, leaving them without air during the way back if they didn't have an appropriately placed resupply. I sometimes manage to make it work, but it's really just random, it's never very accurate. So I prefer to think that this strategy is dead and buried. Maybe the devs could make Molly take these routes only in non-low O2 missions? That could fix the issue, but yet again, I can totally see teams not making it back to the drop pod in time because Molly was there too early, or not finding their way there because the lamps are put in a vertical tunnel. But still, please make it a thing. Other than that, it still works if you drill straight down with Driller or pickaxe your way with Scout. Ideally using something like Rocky Mountain not to lose too much time on 3-hit terrain like Magma Core or Crystalline Caverns. These were the strategies to manipulate the environment to your liking. The secret sauce really to the best times in DRG. Now, to start getting faster in your deep dive times, start by learning the maps and the layout by heart. The first thing you want to do when speedrunning is mapping your way through the deep dive and the elite deep dive. So to see exactly where the objectives are placed and what's the fastest way to get them done. That way you can improve your time by doing it faster every time you repeat the process. So a couple things about the objectives and what order to do them and what's the best way to handle them. If you have something like mini mules and eggs in the same mission, which one are you going to go for first? The answer is the mini mules first. Because the mini mules are longer to do in general and you have less enemies that spawn when you do them. Plus, if you're running solo, you can put Bosco on an egg when you're finishing that last mini mule to gain some time. You will get a bit of enemies when you dig out the legs for the mini mules, but not as much as the eggs, which will spawn way more enemies. So it's during those enemy waves that you want to be heading out to the drop pod instead of repairing a mule. Now, for a scenario where there's a black box and a dreadnought, which one do you go for first? Well, you want to go for the dreadnought first, because you won't have all the enemies that the black box has accumulated to fight the boss. If you do it before, you'll have a way better time doing the black box as well. So that was for the objective priority in a bit. Now for some more general tips to keep in mind when trying to get some really good times. If you run solo, make sure Bosco is always doing something. This is a big time saver to have Bosco on a quark or egg or a mini mule leg while you're focused on the other objectives. Another tip, make sure to grab the Nitra last. If you're doing it correctly, you won't need Nitra or a resupply for your first stage, so instead of focusing on Nitra, finish the level as fast as you can, and when Molly goes back to the drop pod, you can't accelerate that, it is how it is. So use that time to then go around and grab more Nitra for the next stage and deposit it on the side of the drop pod. Also, quick tip for those who didn't know, mini mules gives you between 40 and 60 Nitra, so if you have a mini mule mission and you have to repair 2 mini mules, that's a guaranteed resupply without having to go get any Nitra. But really, in the end, what's gonna make the difference is your ability to focus on objectives and not enemies. You cannot afford to fight the enemies that are around you when doing the objectives. You're gonna have to find a way around it, or to know how to deal with them as fast as possible. That's why it's very recommended to play Cryo, whether it's on the Scout or the Driller. The Cryo element is one of the most overpowered elements in Deep Rock Galactic, allowing you to eliminate in one-shot flying bugs and swarmers. Also allows you to one-shot Praetorians, two-shot Oppressors, and also kill Dreadnoughts in record time. I think I'll make a separate video on the fastest way to kill each new Dread with the Scout and the Driller, so you guys can get some training on really gaining minutes on Dreadnoughts. Another thing that can help you gain a very small amount of time is learning how to animation cancel, whether it's for mining or reloading. I've talked about it in my tips to Has 5 video, so go check that out for more information. And lastly, what do you build for speedrunning? I show my builds at the end of every speedrun on my YouTube and Twitch, but basically if there's Dreadnought, you want to go big damage, and if there's no Dreadnought, you don't need to. It's basically a matter of overclock if you're going to go jumbo shells on the jury-rigged boomstick for the Scout, or if you're gonna go special powder. In terms of perks, if there's Morkite, you're gonna need deep pockets, and the +5 on the armor to make sure you're at full 60 pocket. By carrying more Morkite, you have to go to the mule less often, and so you're grabbing Morkite faster. Iron Will on higher hazard is a must bring. It's a quality of life perk during the mapping, so you always have an extra res, but it really comes in clutch when there's a lot of enemies, and since you're invincible during that time, you can use it as a tactical ability to deposit eggs or press buttons. Do note that if Bosco is on a task while you go down, he will cancel it, even if you Iron Will, so keep an eye on Bosco when you go down. Then, Beastmaster is essential on solo speedrunning. While Steve is active, he takes up enemy aggro for you, so it's perfect to keep the enemies occupied while you do your objectives. Veteran Depositor is perfect for speedrunning. You deposit all of your pockets faster, and you will need it since you have 60 minerals instead of 40, and you take 30% less damage when you're just near the mule. This is ideal for clutch deposits or even black boxes on elite deep dives. And Thorns, when there's a lot of swarmers and jellyfishes like in the Dance Biozone. This perk can literally save a run. For beers, there's only 3 or 4 beers that really matter in speedrunning. The best one is Dark Morkite. because it multiplies all the morkite that you pick up with your pickaxe only, sorry TCF enthusiasts, by 1.44. So if you have 200 out of 250 morkite in like the second room of the seed and the rest is like 2 rooms ahead, with dark morkite you can skip the rest of the morkite, so it can be a really big time saver on morkite missions. Close second we have of course Rocky Mountain. This is especially valuable for Scout more than Driller, because you'll be able to take the objectives like a Quark's eggs and mini mule legs way faster, and maybe even dig shortcuts as the Scout with this beer, making every terrain one pickaxe hit. Then the 2 other beers that are somewhat good in speedrunning are Red Rock Blasters for elite deep dives, so you have more survivability and go down less often to do the EDD faster, and Slayer Stout to have faster power attacks which are super effective on dreadnoughts and work well on eggs and quarks. On the topic of beers, is it allowed or not in DRG speedrunning? Well, yes, just say that you use the beer during the run. Let's just say there's beer category runs and no beer category runs. So that's it. And so adding together all these tips and doing the runs multiple times will get you down to some really good speedrunning times. A good goal you can set yourself when starting is going under 40 minutes, then under 30, etc, etc. So there you have it. I hope this video was useful and you learned a little bit about speedrunning. And hopefully I'll be seeing you in the Deep Rock Galactic speedrunning tab on the official Deep Rock Galactic Discord, or in my chat on Twitch every weekend. If you did like the video, make sure to subscribe to it, it helps out the channel immensely. And go check out my other speedrun videos to see how I use these tips on my live streams. Other than that, take care everyone. Peace.